So today we're going to be doing a beginner's guide to sound design in Falcon 2. So I'm going to be making a really simple patch, and I will split the video into 4 separate chapters. The first one, we're just going to be playing around with a single oscillator and looking at some very simple modulations. In chapter 2, we'll be looking at some more advanced modulation, maybe some polyphonic LFO, something like that. In the third section, we're going to be looking at how you can layer your sounds at the different levels within the hierarchy within Falcon. And finally, we're going to be looking at some effects and how to set up some macros. So if you're following along, by the end, we should have something like this. Now, I've been finding the whole process of doing sound design within Falcon just a really relaxing experience. So grab your coffee, grab your beer, smoke them if you got them, and let's get into this. So let's have a quick look at the GUI in Falcon. We have 3 main sections. On the right here, you can see all my sound packs. We also have our samplers, our synthesizers, and all our effects. The middle section here, this is where we do all our sound design. And on the left here, we have a sort of admin section. If you can't see the left and right panels, just click on these buttons here to reveal them or hide them. In the main window here, you can see we have our level hierarchy, program, layers, key groups, and oscillators. We're not going to worry about that just now. We'll talk about that later on. So for now, let's just reveal the oscillator and the key groups. And I'm going to click over here to our sound sources and grab an analog synthesizer. Drag it down to this keyboard section, and you can see we can map this over a group of keys, a single key, or the whole keyboard by dragging the arrow up to the top of this section. And now you can see it's created for us an analog with a sine wave on it. So I'm going to change the waveform to a saw. And the first thing that I want to modulate is this start phase dial here. So you can see as I rotate it, we have a different start phase point for this waveform. So I'm going to right click, add modulation, go down to voice, and go to linear key follow. And watch what happens when I press different keys on the keyboard now. So right now we are working at the key group level, and my amp envelope at the key group level is underneath key groups and right here. So what I'm going to do with the envelope is turn the dynamic dial down. So it doesn't matter how hard or quiet I hit the keyboard, the volume is always going to be the same. Pull down the sustain. And use the decay to determine the duration of the note. The next thing I want is a filter. So we can either grab the filter from the effects section here, or we can just go to the effects slot, click the plus sign, and select a filter. So I'm going to choose the digital filter. So the velocity that I hit the keys no longer affects the dynamics as I turned this dial down before. But what I do want it to affect is the filter. So I want it so that the harder that I hit a key, the more the filter will open up. And the gentler that I hit a key, the less the filter will open up. So to achieve that, I'm going to go to frequency, right click, add modulation. And at the key group level, I'm going to choose an analog ADSR. See it's appeared here. I'm just going to click on it. And if I hit a key, we can now see the frequency dial responding to this ADSR. Let's turn down the sustain. And now in this ADSR, if I go to dynamic and turn that all the way up, if I hit a key softly, the filter hardly moves. And if I hit the key hard, see it opens right up. So let's just do one more simple modulation on this one oscillator before we move on to the next chapter. So let's scroll down here and let's just minimize this mapping just so we have a bit more real estate on the screen. And what I want to do is modulate the pitch, and I'm going to use an LFO to do this. So I'm going to add modulation. At the key group level, I'm going to add LFO. LFO has appeared here, and if I hit a key, we should be able to see and hear what's happening with the pitch. Let's go back to my amp envelope and turn the sustain up a bit. LFO, increase the frequency. And we can play with the depth. So I want to edit the modulation on this pitch control. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking and go to Edit Modulation. So we can see at the key group level, we have our LFO1 here. And the LFO is moving the pitch up by 1 semitone. So I'm just going to pull that down and make it really subtle. Let's turn the frequency down. And let's turn the depth down as well. So on the LFO, we have the phase position, as in the starting point of the LFO when you hit a key. Now I want that phase start to be random every time I hit a key. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking, add modulation, go to other, and go to unipolar random. And watch what happens now. I'm just going to keep pressing the same key. So with those 3 modulations, I now have a very simple sound that changes ever so slightly every time I hit a key. So let's look at some more advanced modulation. Firstly, I'm just going to do a bit of housekeeping. Just going to label this. And label the LFO too. And I want to make the filter envelope a little bit more subtle so we can hear this next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the frequency up a bit. And edit. And turn down. Cool. Turn the frequency up a bit more. Awesome. So I'm going to add a second digital filter. And this frequency I want to be controlled by an LFO. And again, we're going to be doing this at the key group level. New LFO. And the LFO has appeared here. Let me just label that. So now when I press a key, we should hear that frequency being modulated by this LFO. I'm going to change the LFO shape to ramp down. Pull down the depth. I'll turn up the frequency. Now, if I play a chord and hit all 3 notes at the same time, we get this. But if I play those notes in succession, listen to what happens. Now you can hear we have a separate LFO for every key that I play on the keyboard. Polyphonic LFO, pretty cool, yeah? So watch what happens if I modulate the phase starting point the same way we did before by going to voice and let's go linear key follow. So if I press the notes, see we have a different phase starting point for every key that hits. So now if I play a chord, we get that cool little flutter effect. Now let's clear this modulation and let's add a random. Let's go random unipolar again and let's see what happens now. So I'm just pressing the same chord in the same way each time, and you can hear we get something different every time. How cool is that? Now if I play about with the smooth dial here, that's going to smooth off those harsh edges on this LFO. And let's turn the depth down. Frequency up a bit. Turn the frequency of the filter up a bit. Okay, let's turn this frequency down now. So it's very subtle, but if I turn the filter off and I turn it on, you can hear we just got a slight movement, which is just adding a little bit of dissonance, but also a little bit of interest to an otherwise boring sound. So let's go one step further and let's add some unison to our analog. Let's go with maybe 3 voices. Let's turn on the stereo button and increase the stereo spread. And maybe play back with the detune amount. Awesome. Now in our filter section here, we have the spread dial. I'll play back with that. Let's add an LFO to that. And this LFO, let's label it. If we click this metronome button here, the LFO will run in time with our track. Let's turn the depth down. And again, let's have a different phase start point for every key that I hit. Let's go with organ pan this time. Okay, so now we're starting to get something quite interesting out of a single sawtooth. Now I want to shout out to a YouTuber called Ricky Tynes for showing me that cool little LFO trick. I'll leave a link to his video below. Now his video was a tutorial on the Novation Peak, but the cool thing about working in Falcon is you can pretty much watch any tutorial on any synthesizer, hardware or software, and easily be able to recreate that within Falcon, because we can have an unlimited amount of oscillators and filters, etc., which is a nice little segue onto our next chapter, which is on layering. So far, I haven't really talked about the hierarchy structure within Falcon, but right now we are working at the key group level, and that is represented by this icon here with this square grayed out at the bottom of the 3. So I can layer this sound at the key group level by going down to where our oscillator is, just clicking on the plus sign and add in any one of these samplers or synthesizers. So let's go with a wavetable. Scroll down and let's have a listen. Let's change the wavetable. Let's go with something analogy. Now, because I've added this wavetable in the same key group as this analog, that means all these controls and effects within this key group section are going to be affecting both this analog and this wavetable. So let's go up to the amp envelope and let's pull up the attack. So now let's add something at the layer level. So to do this, what I'm going to do is go into the left-hand section here and go to list. And you can see we have a list of what we've got going on so far. We have our part and then our program, layer, and our key group. So this key group, let's call, sounds a little bit Blade Runner-y. I'm not very good at naming patches. Run re 1R. And using this wrench tool here, I'm going to copy and then paste that. So basically now I've just got a duplicate of this. Let's call this 2. And with this one selected, I'm going to take the wavetable away just by clicking on the cross here. Let me go up to the first patch and I'm just going to turn down the volume on that just so we can hear just the second patch for now. Go back to the second patch. And let's pull down the attack and the sustain and the release. And let's just make a little pluck sound. And if I bring back in the first key group, let's pull up the attack on that. And the sustain. Turn up the gain a bit. So let me just change the name of the second key group to Blade Pluck. And on the pluck, let's add an additive synth just to help with that pluckiness a bit more. I'll go back to my first patch and let's give it a little bit of release. In this Blade Runnery key group, I'm going to add some distortion. Let's go with drive. And we hear that the drive is only going to be affecting this key group and not the pluck. Add an ADSR to this so that it ramps up over time. Edit that, turn it down a bit, turn up the release. So we can see adding the effect at the key group level is only affecting the sounds in that particular key group, which is the analog and the wavetable in this case. But if we go up to the layers level, if I add an effect here, now that effect will affect both the Blade Runnery and the pluck, as will any modulations that we add here. So let's add a delay. Turn on the metronome. Turn up the feedback. Change the timing. Play back with the filters. And let's name this layer the blades. And let's open up the program layer. So to put it simply, every program can be made up of several layers, and every layer can be made up of several key groups, and every key group can be made up of several oscillators. And we can have modulations at every level of this hierarchy. So now that you've got an idea of how complex we can make things, you can see why it's a good idea to always be labeling as you go along. So let's go up to the program level and let's add an event. So I'm going to go script processor, harmonization, code bank, and I'm just going to load up a preset. So let's go sus4 feeling and let's keep it in the key of C. So now when I press a single key on my keyboard, which will be any of these green keys highlighted at the top here, you can see that a chord is now outputted. So because I've added this code script at the program level, that's going to affect every layer beneath it. So let's add a new layer by clicking on the plus button. And we have layer 2, which we can see now is completely blank. Let's minimize the program. And let's go with an analog stack. Let's open up the mapping. And let's mute the blades level by clicking on the tick there. And we can hear the code script from the program level is still affecting what we have going on here. So let's create something simple in this analog stack. Let's go with the square. Again, let's play about with some of our modulations. Again, let's make this one more plucky. And at the layer level in this new layer, I'm going to add an arpeggiator. Let's unmute the first layer and let's have a listen. Let's add a filter to this. Let's do it at the key group level. Let's go with the silent key filter. Let's modulate this with a multi-envelope. Let's put it in time to the project and let's find preset. Turn retrigger off. Try a different preset. Let's edit this so it's not as dramatic. And let's modulate this again with an LFO. Turn the depth down. Let's turn the metronome on. Let's change the pattern of the ARP. See what they have in the presets. Let's turn the volume up of that. Right, so finally, let's have a look at adding some effects. So I'm going to do this to both layers by adding some effects at the program level. And let's go with, yeah, you guessed it, another filter. So we can hear that's affecting both layers. Let's label the layer 2 quickly. Now, if I right click the filter on here and go to assign to macro, I'm going to add a new macro, and the macro should have appeared down in the modulations here, macro 1, and let's label that filter cutoff. Now, if we go to our info tab now, you can see we have our program with a filter cutoff dial in it. So I'm going to go back to the edit tab And in our script processor, where we see the key here right now, it's in the key of C. But we can change the key. So let's add that to a macro. And let's call this key. And if we go back to our info tab, we see we can change key by moving the dial. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell us what key it is. It just gives it as a percentage, but a cool little control anyway. Go back to edit. Now let's add an effect track. Let's go with this feedback machine. And let's have a listen to this. Wow. Let's turn that mix down. And let's add this to a macro as well. Let's call it feedback mix. Let's go to our info tab. And then I'm just going to save this program. And let me save it with the rest of my UVI presets. I'm going to call this a swampy breakdown, because that's what it sounds like to me. Right, so that's my beginner's guide to sound design in Falcon 2. As I said, I've kept it really simple, and I've hardly scratched the surface of what this thing can do, but hopefully I've given you enough information for you to go and explore and make sounds until the cows come home. But anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, and I guess you did, if you're still here, please like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of thing. I've been Craig Lopez. This has been Tutorialism. Peace.